All right, so I thought I would do this one a little bit differently. Since that was the very last game at Folsom Field, I wanted to give it some time to kind of marinate and think about it for a minute. Colorado loses 34-31, fourth game in a row they have lost. They fall to 4-6 on the season, dropping this one to the Arizona Wildcats. Arizona, man, at Folsom Field, they just seem to have Colorado's number. They always have, at least in the Pac-12. Hopefully that changes the Big 12, but today stayed the same. Arizona didn't take the lead in this football game until the very last play. Colorado led the entire way. This felt like one, yet again, that the Buffs let slip. Their fourth consecutive loss at home, too, by the way. That hasn't happened in a minute. I think 2015? Yeah, that sounds about right. Brian Howell had that stat a little earlier this week. This is a Colorado team right now who impressed me today because of the fight they showed. It was not a good offensive performance the last 2 weeks against UCLA and Oregon State. Now, those are two very good defenses, especially in the Pac-12. But, look, I was weary heading into this game that Colorado was going to be able to bounce back offensively whatsoever. They haven't shown an ability to change week to week. And I will give this coaching staff credit because this coaching staff did commit today a little bit more to rushing the football. Now, it would have behooved them to do that a little bit later in the game. We'll get there, but they did make that commitment to rushing the ball just a little bit more, and in doing so, it really opened things up for Shedeur and took some of that pressure off of them. They only allowed 3 sacks today. That's down from 4 last week, down from 7 the week before. You'll sign up for that. I mean, probably still too much pressure, but it did get a little bit better, and part of that is because they ran the football and made Arizona's pass rush think twice. They made their pass rushers restart their pass rush. It wasn't just an obvious passing down every single time, and that was really nice to see. I thought, on the whole, it was a really well-called game by Pat Shurmur. I thought Pat Shurmur did a really nice job up until the fourth quarter, and we'll get there. But Colorado, I mean, you're talking about a situation where this team scored 16 points against UCLA, then the next week 19 points against Oregon State. Well, they came out and scored 24 points in the first half, and they led at half 24-17. There was a chance they could have maybe punched it in there at the end of the first half, but things got a little bit wonky, as they have, unfortunately, lately end-of-half game management situations for this coaching staff. They're struggling right now in that regard, and I don't know that any of them would tell you differently. Although I didn't really agree with some of the reasoning and justification behind Coach Prime's explanations tonight. We'll get into that in a bit. But, again, 10 carries to running backs in the first half. They opened things up a little bit more, and Shedeur was able to have, a little bit more time to operate. But the other part of this is that Shedeur looked better than he did last week. I thought he really did. I mean, this is a kid who could barely walk when he left the press conference against Oregon State. Tonight, he was moving around. There was a play, I believe, like the first series of that Oregon State game where he had to scramble, and it looked like he had nothing. It looked like he could barely move. And tonight, whether he was gutting through the pain, which I know he was, but tonight it did look like he had some more mobility. So, and I asked him about it after the game, and he said that he was doing the right things this week, taking care of his body. Clearly, whatever they were doing treatment-wise really helped him out this week, and he was able to function just a little bit better, certainly running the football on the field. And he finished the game as their leading rusher, 13 carries, 42 yards, including sack numbers. So, look, I mean, you'll take that. You'll take that at this stage. And Colorado was in prime position to win this game, heading into the second half. I thought, look, Arizona got the ball back right away after the field goal to take the 24-17 lead at the end of the first half. Arizona gets the ball back right away. And before I move on real quick, there was another really, really crucial moment in that first half. Colorado with the roughing the passer penalty on third down on the goal line. They're about to make the defensive stand and hold Arizona to just a field goal. And then that roughing the passer penalty absolutely was a backbreaker because it was a free pass into the end zone at that stage. It tied the game 14-14. Colorado with a really nice drive coming back down. 21-14, great play call there. I think it was that play, right? That I believe it was. I just want to make sure. Yeah, it was that Savion Wilkerson who finished that drive off with the 1-yard touchdown, but Xavier Weaver had a touchdown taken off the board prior to that, and it was a great play call. Trips to the left. They cleared out the left side. They brought Weaver on the underneath route, hit Weaver. He almost hit the touchdown. Another really nice game from Xavier Weaver, 5 catches, 84 yards for Weaver. He's been really good. This was his last game at Folsom Field in 1 year as a Buff. I've been so impressed with Xavier Weaver, both on and off the field. Really, really nice young man. And on the field, he's a hell of a football player. He's got a real chance to play on Sundays. In fact, I think Xavier Weaver will be the highest drafted Buff out of this upcoming draft class here coming up in 2024. So Colorado takes 24-17 lead at half. First drive out of halftime. Man, they struggle with the first drive out of halftime. Arizona marched right down the field and punched it in like 3 or 4 plays. It was like, oh boy, okay, now you got a shootout. It felt to me at that moment that neither team was going to be able to stop each other, except that really wasn't how it played out. Neither team was great in the second half, but Arizona was certainly better than Colorado, partially due to the fact that they just made the adjustment to start running the football. Arizona tonight, 27 carries, 207 yards on the ground. How about Coleman? 11 rushes for 179, an average of 16.3 per carry. There were some massive holes in the A and the B gap, but more than that, physical, breaking tackles. He stiff-armed Shiloh into next week on one of those big chunk runs. But Colorado could not stop the chunk run tonight, and many different times throughout the course of that game, it was a backbreaker. Colorado's defense didn't produce any turnovers. Neither defense produced any turnovers. Both teams took care of the football, and we knew that coming in, right? Arizona takes care of the ball. So the second half starts. Arizona marches down. They punch it in, and, now you got a game. And at that stage, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, well, I really, really wonder if Colorado is going to stay somewhat committed to the ground game, because in my eyes, that was maybe the biggest catalyst to their success in the first half, was just simply getting yards on the ground. It reminded me a lot of the second half against USC. Shedeur carrying, and also even Wilkerson and Hankerson. I mean, both those guys finish, it looks like Wilkerson 3 yard per carry average, Hankerson 3.4. I mean, they are scrapping for yards on the ground, but the simple fact that they were willing to do it, it allowed them to take some of the pressure off of Shedeur, because there were some big conversions. Like I said, so second half, they march down and score, and that's when Colorado responds almost immediately there. I believe teams exchange punts, but Colorado, with a really solid drive, 8 plays, 35 yards, and it only took off about 4 minutes, but that was off of another, and see, that's the thing, is Colorado won the field position battle in this game. They won the field position battle. I mean, many times. Mark Vassett was outstanding today. Outstanding. Give him the Ray guy now. I'm ready for it. I mean, if there's a better punter in the country, maybe it exists, but he's got to be kicking as good as anybody right now. I mean, he gave them just about as much as you could get out of a punter, honestly. Then that, like I said, so 8 plays, 35 yards, 3:47 off the clock, capped off with that Mikey Harrison touchdown. They go up 31-24 at the end of the third. That was a really good moment for Colorado. I didn't love the fact that they used Dylan Edwards so much on that drive. They were doing a good job in the first half rotating running backs, I thought. And then on that drive, they got away. It was just all Dylan. There were some plays where it just felt harder. But one of the themes up until this point in the game is Colorado was able to overcome their self-inflicted mistakes, which we have not seen for a few weeks. The self-inflicted mistakes the last several weeks have bogged this team down. They have not been able to overcome them. Well, Colorado was penalized 11 times tonight, 83 yards. Arizona 8 times, 87 yards. This game was officiated very strangely. The back judge from like 30 yards away, no other official making the call. Here comes the bomb of a late flag, and you're going, really, man? How do you think that you have the better angle on that than, your 4 buddies? Anyway, I digress. So they were able to overcome those self-inflicted mistakes, which is a huge part of the reason why they were able to generate momentum offensively. And that was really good to see. That was really encouraging. In fact, it was so encouraging to the point where you're like, hey, there's some good vibes here. I mean, you're able to overcome these mistakes against a team that is coming off of 3 straight wins against ranked opponents. It's damn impressive. Damn impressive. And so heading into the fourth quarter, you were going to be tied because Arizona had the ball on the doorstep right there, 1st and goal from like the 7. They punch it in the first play of the fourth quarter. So essentially the fourth quarter, for all intents and purposes, began with Colorado with the football, 31-31 in a tie game. And at that stage, they just couldn't generate. Like, I thought things went well. and I got to look it up here. Yeah, they got the ball back. Yeah, 5 plays, 4 yards, a lot of throwing a ball there after that touchdown. And then, man, yeah, there was a penalty on that 5 plays, 4 yards. Then the next drive, that was a problem. That was a problem. You make it out, and you got to punt it away again, and then 6 minutes left in the game, you get the ball, and you are in a tie ball game here, and you're driving, okay? You're snapping the ball with like 25, 20 seconds, 15 seconds left on the play clock. And in that moment, all you had to do was just consume the clock, leave Arizona almost no time, possibly force them to use their timeouts, which if Colorado had run the ball on 3rd and 1, and this is probably the biggest moment of the game. You could probably point back to a bunch of others. But if Colorado runs that football on 3rd and 1, I'd be stunned if they didn't get it. They just were having success in the running game. Anthony Hankerson had just broken off like a first down run where he broke 3 tackles. So it's 3rd and 1. They call the Shedeur rollout. It does not go well. They lose the numbers battle at the line of scrimmage. I'm pretty sure he gets flushed out. He's got a bail on it or throws it. I don't know, incomplete. And they punted, and that was tough, man. That was tough because you're near midfield at that stage. You had 2 cracks at it. You've got, at that point, I think it was around 5 minutes left to go, and you've got 2 cracks at it on the ground. 2 cracks. And they decided not to use either one of them when the running game had been effective. And Coach Prime talked about after the game how he's not going to do that because he's there in practice, and they're doing things situationally in practice. They would have gotten that yard on one of those 2 plays. And if not, then why? As a coach, how can you come up there and say, we can't get a yard? Coach Prime talks about win now, let's do this now. How can you say we can't get a yard, so I'm just going to throw my hands up? I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I just do. I do. I don't agree with his philosophy in how they're approaching some of these situations, and that's fine. I don't have to. I just didn't love the fact that he justified it in the press conference by saying, what happens if we don't get it there? Or what happens if we run the ball and don't get it? Then the criticism is going to be, well, why didn't you pass? No, it's not. That's not going to be the criticism. I guarantee you, not one person would say that. Not one. Because the correct call is to run the football there. And if you don't run the ball, you do have another crack at it on 4th and 1, which that would have been the option to take, knowing the feel and the pulse of that game in that moment. Arizona was moving the football well. They had held them on a few drives, but it was more of the field position that Arizona was in. That was why. I mean, Colorado's defense did a good job getting them off the field, but, I mean, I just don't agree with that at all. First of all, no one's going to criticize you and say, oh, why didn't you pass it on 3rd and 1? No one would. There isn't a soul out there that would have said that. I didn't like that justification. It's just not accurate at all. At all. It just felt like, hey, there's a moment for some humility. There's a moment to go, you know what? Looking back on it. Instead he answered the question with, you've watched our offense all year, right? Thanks. Maybe he wasn't happy with the play that was called. So I don't know. And, he keeps telling us that there are things that are happening communications-wise that we're not privy to, and we're not inside those buildings. So I'll give him that. I don't know what's going on. I'm not a fly on the wall. I'm not wearing a headset. It just seems pretty – I mean, look, you may not have a 100% chance of conversion, but it's a whole hell of a lot better than throwing a ball. It just is with the offensive line you have. It just is. Like, you weren't fooling anybody. That's the thing. Everyone and their mother knew that they weren't going to run that ball. I knew they weren't going to run that ball. And it is what it is. I think it was that moment when they lost control. They were leading. They had full control of that moment up until that point, and they decided to punt it away when they were nearing midfield. So that's a tough one, man. And then you had the Mata miss. anything over 40 with Mata, I start to get a little shaky. He's good from in close, but I know he's 9 of 11 now, but I just and then at the end of the game, Arizona's driving. There's like 2 and change left. Colorado has to let Arizona score there. Coach Prime at the end of the game was asked about that, and he said they're still playing for the field goal, to hold them to a field goal. They weren't going to hold them to a field goal. They hadn't held them in the red zone all day, except for the one play that they got the roughing the passer on. I mean, Colorado's defense did bow their back several times, but at that moment, there was no time. You didn't have any timeouts. That wasn't good. To me, you want to give your offense the best chance with the football, and I felt at that moment, with about 2 and change left, just let them score, because it was clear that they were running through you. I mean, it was the second play. There was like a 70-yard run or 60-yard run. So I don't know, man. I mean, we can point to a bunch of them. You can point to the roughing the passer in the first half. I just didn't think that was handled right. I didn't. I just think you give your offense the best chance with the football, given the fact that the probabilities that they were going to hold them there. Arizona had 2 plays. Like, even if they held them on 3rd down, they would have gone for it on 4th down. That Colorado defense isn't stopping anybody, especially after giving up almost 200 yards on the ground. I'm sorry. Just not going to happen. It was a misread. It was a misread. So, again, they had that game. It was really well played. I thought it was really well called. Defensively, they gave up a bunch of chunk plays, but offensively, I thought on the whole, they hit a struggle in the second half again. They just can't string this together. Like, they can't string 2 halves of good football together. They can't string all 3 phases together. It has plagued them, and I'm sure it's pissing off Coach Prime. I don't blame him. I mean, shoot, it's making everybody out there frustrated that they can't find a way to consistently play complementary football. That's definitely that's a huge bummer. I mean, it's holding them back. But even still, they have a chance to win some of these games with a few different decisions. And I really believe if you run the ball on 3rd and 1, I believe you get it. Second of all, I believe if you run it twice, I know you get it. And at that stage, you're in full control of the game if you were using the play clock appropriately. But they weren't, because at that moment, you're just run your 4-minute offense, right? Just try and kill as much clock as possible. They just didn't. They were just kind of going and not really with any intention behind it. It was just, kind of business as usual. And in that moment, it's just not. So you've got to treat it differently. I just didn't think they did tonight. It ends up costing them. They lose to Arizona. They're on a 4-game losing streak. Look, there are going to be a lot of people who question Coach Prime's decision-making, and certainly I'm among them. I'm not going to lie about that. I think there's probably going to be more people that question the way he justified and addressed some of these things in the press conference. He might need to take like a minute, like a beat, before he comes in next time. Maybe on the road it'll be different, but I think he needs to take a beat, because that's all they've got left is just at Washington State and at Utah. But just take a beat. Like, he's struggling with the losing in the first place, and then he's taking every question personally and getting really defensive, and that's not a good look at all. The problem is you can't have it both ways, okay? He sets the expectation, and a lot of us from the outside at the beginning of the year are talking about a building program. We're talking about a program that is going to take a few years to really get up and off the ground. But Prime came in and said, I want wins. I want wins now. You can have your expectation. That's not my expectation, which I understand. But there was a lack of foresight in what was coming, because I think there was a bit of a lack of experience in this situation. Like, I saw a lot of this coming. That's why I started getting on him about running the football, or at least asking him about running the football after Colorado State, because I was stunned they didn't do it. Because against Oregon and USC and all these good teams, the Pac-12, you're going to have to be able to run the ball to win. And it's clear now, if it was never clear before, you have to be able to run the football to win. And clearly there's some personnel issues there, but I believe there's also a philosophical issue there. So that will have to be addressed. It just will. And Shedeur after the game also mentioned that he doesn't believe in running the football what did he say? He goes, if it doesn't work, why would we do it? Well, you do it exactly why you did it tonight, to take some of the pressure off, to make the defense play honest. Even if it's not overly successful, the running game is a non-negotiable. At Jackson State, you may have been able to get away with it if you out-talented teams. Eventually, the talent would just wear you down. That's not the case here. You have to be able to manufacture wins, and being a balanced offense and providing an attack that's not so telegraphed. That's a huge part of it. It's a huge part of it. So, look, I think from the 30,000-foot view, there's a lot of things to be positive about here. There's a lot of things to understand this program is headed in the right direction. And as Coach Prime said on Tuesday, we're not where we want to be. We're not where we used to be. It's entirely accurate. Entirely. But at the same time, I struggle with setting an expectation really high and then getting upset when people ask you about upholding that expectation, which is where I think he's at right now because he's struggling with the losing. And they came out and they showed us all the stats to try and be like, look at what we've done this year. No one is discounting what they've done this year. But because Prime has wanted to enter the conversation of now, we're going to evaluate it as now, because that's how he is. And so all of this good stuff that they are doing is acknowledged and is recognized. But you also have to acknowledge that there's a long ways to go, and he knows that. But they're not as far away as he thinks. Now, talent-wise, I believe in that regard they are. But they have enough talent, especially at the quarterback position, to be able to manufacture some wins. They should have beat Stanford. They should have won the game today. There's two more right there. There's your bowl eligibility right there. And then if they ran the ball against UCLA and Oregon State and were more balanced and were able to find some way to keep Shedeur upright and not just absolutely get slaughtered at the line of scrimmage, who knows? Who knows? USC, what happens if they don't spot them a 21-point lead? They have been in these games. They have been in these games. There are signs of progress, but there are also things that if you do not correct right now, they will be problems next year. And don't bury your head in the sand and go, oh, you know what? I was right in my decision not to let them score. You know what? I was right in my decision not to run the ball on 3rd and 1. You weren't. So there is a part of this coaching where, first of all, people want this to work. I want this to work for Deion in Boulder, right? But I'm not going to sit there and act like it's also not my job to be critical of it. And I find this dichotomy of the Prime fan base and Buffs fans and even new and old, and I find this whole dynamic very fascinating because there's a lot of people who are really firmly set on the future, and I believe that to be the case as well. I've been talking all year. Next year's the year. Next year's the year. But Prime has set a higher expectation than that. And so to uphold them to that expectation, this is what we do. Because there are some things that are not being accounted for and done right now that have led to some of these losses. And football is a game of one-score wins and losses. That's just how it works. College football, not as much as the NFL, but a lot of good games between good teams, especially deep into the year, are settled one score here or there. Penalties are a huge part of it, right? Lack of discipline's a big part of it. But also game management, play calling, and execution, right? And I think that there's culpability everywhere, but in a situation like today where you've already done so much work, just take the path of least resistance sometimes. And I think that's what's frustrating for fans because it is the path of least resistance. It is harder to complete a ball on 3rd and 1 than it is to rush for 1 yard, even with that offensive. It just is. It just is. I think there were maybe 2 negative rushes to running backs today? Pretty good ratio to me. I'd have given it a shot 1 or 2 times. And he also said, what happens if it doesn't work out there? Well, you're going to have to make a defensive stand at some point either way. And at the very same time, this is a Colorado program that has to take the chances when they're presented to them. They have not earned the right to be passive and play not to lose. They have to be aggressive. They have to take what's in front of them. I've always believed that you would rather have an aggressive mistake than a passive decision that kills you, right? Like, I would rather play to win and have that burn me than play to lose, and not all the time, but in those moments, you just read the game. Coach Prime read the game, felt like he wasn't with it, didn't agree with it. Maybe it was Pat Shurmur, didn't agree with it. I read the game, felt like that was the call. I think you go back on 3rd and 1. I think analytically you got a much higher percentage of converting than you do throwing. That I know. And I know you do twice. So, I think there were some interesting moments in the game today and overall with this program moving forward. But I tell you this, it don't get any easier. They have been killed in Pullman the last, 3-4 times they've been out there. Killed. And the weather on Friday is a short week. The weather on Friday is supposed to be like 37 degrees. I think raining at night. It's a 7:30 local kickoff. Not going to be a fun one. That I can promise you. You need the ground game there. But Washington State, they've struggled, over the latter half of the season. But don't think for a second that that's not a team that's going to be licking their chops to face this Buffs team and get a little taste, because everybody's got CU circled. It's Coach Prime. That's part of it. And it's a shame that I feel like there are real missed opportunities here, but it's also part of being year one in a new program. So I also get that as well. It just sucks the fashion in which some of them happen, but really the fashion that any losses happen aren't great. So there's some grace there. But I think the lack of humility is getting some people, and that's just going to be the way it is. I kind of accepted it. In fact, I could tell Prime was in such a mood, I didn't even ask him a question tonight. There was nothing I needed to ask him tonight. Everything he was taking personally tonight. So it's not, And again, I go back to, it's funny to me because there's a lot of people who think that being critical is people not wanting to see them succeed, but in fact, a lot of the times it's the opposite, right? It's because people who are being critical can understand that there are a few steps that need to be taken here to maybe tighten things up. And that's, I think, in summation, how I would describe what needs to happen right now. Things just need to get tightened back up. Like, you had this thing, lock, stock, and barrel, ready to take it into the barn, and you just kind of let it slip. You got to find a way to take that confidence and move forward, because you got two games coming up that are not easy. You want to talk about at Wazoo and at Utah over Thanksgiving, short week at Wazoo, Thanksgiving in Salt Lake. So, look, we'll see how they fare. Bowl eligibility, I guess mathematically, it's still possible, even though I'm here to tell you it's not. I'm here to tell you it's not, unfortunately. I hate to say that, but those two places have not been kind to Colorado, and a win at either would be a flat-out stunner. So I'm just going to move forward, hoping that they can find a way to be competitive here down the stretch, because it does look like at the moment they might finish 0-6. And I think you do lose a little bit of the momentum that you had started at the beginning of the year, unfortunately just not being able to close in football games, and Prime talked about it tonight, not being able to win. They don't know how to win. I would extend that to, from a coaching staff perspective, the coaching staff as well. I think as a player, Deion Sanders, hell of a winner. Hell of a winner, hell of a player. But I'm not judging Deion Sanders a player. I'm judging Deion Sanders a coach. And he's got a ways to go still. And I think he would acknowledge that. I do. As a staff, they have a ways to go. He didn't get it right on his first try at every position. No one does. So in that regard, there is some other grace for that too. The offensive staff next year, I'm sure, will be almost completely different. I would hope that he lets his OC at least, have some say in some of these decisions as far as his position groups. The next OC, it's not going to be Pat Shurmur. I'd be surprised if it's Pat Shurmur. Pat Shurmur might be around, but I'd be surprised if you're the one calling the plays next year. We'll find out. Today was better than last week, that's for sure. Buffs at 4-6, 1-6 in conference. Yeah. That ain't any good. And they're going to have to get better here over a short week. Shedeur, hopefully, will be healthy for that game at Washington State. We're going to find out. That's for sure. So, 30,000-foot view. I mean, people talk about, lose big, lose close, win big. Hopefully, this is the lose close year. I just think that there are some things that could be impediments here moving forward, and I hope it never has to get there. But I do believe that this coaching staff also needs to continue to learn how to manufacture wins, and it is okay if it's not dialed in yet. It just is. Because It's human nature. People are humans. This is a new level for Prime. It just is. And that's okay too. But you're not going to earn yourself a lot of grace with most people. Most people. If you're as defensive as he was, I feel like, and has been lately. But I don't expect anybody, certainly not Deion Sanders, to handle a 4-game losing streak well. It just is what it is right now. They had a chance to snap it. They had a chance to turn some vibes around. They had a chance to maybe, have one of these last two, find a way to sneak out one of these last two, and hell, maybe go to a bowl game. But that seems like it's very far-fetched. I guess there's a chance if they find a way to make it to 5. There's too many bowls and not enough 6-win teams, so at least typically, if there were a 5-win team, I would imagine that they would be first billing to get that invitation. So, all right, well, thanks for watching, y'all. We'll be back Tuesday with the presser. That ought to be interesting. And then I'm off to Pullman here, Spokane, and then Pullman middle of next week. And then 2 more weeks. 2 more weeks of the first year of the Coach Prime era, and then it's all over. But that was the last Pac-12 home game tonight. That was bittersweet. I guess fitting that they lost to Arizona, because Arizona has dealt them some tough L's there over the Pac-12 tenure. And, I, for one, am glad Arizona's going to be around in the Big 12, although who knows what the hell's going to happen with their budget now that they got those, overspent $240 million and whatever the hell happens down there in Tucson. Luckily, those are not my problems to figure out. Appreciate you tuning in. I'll see you later.